everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm making a digital card, and so this is going to be a card for my brother-in-law for his birthday. The reason I'm doing it this way is because I don't have any stamps that I feel suit him, and so I'm going to take his favorite subjects and make a card, but also integrate critters because critters are cute and they're my favorite thing to have in a card. So I'm going to show you the process of what I do for this card. So I'm going to use my iPad, but I'm going to set that aside until a little bit later. I'm going to use a sketchbook to start. So I have some ideas that I've been thinking of. So my brother-in-law really likes football, and his favorite team is in the playoffs right now. That's the Green Bay Packers. And so I wanted to do a card that had the colors of the Green Bay Packers and had a football theme to it. So I did some sketches. I had this idea of a hedgehog. So I started looking up some pictures of hedgehogs and looking at cartoons. I searched Google Images and looked at cartoon hedgehogs, found some that I liked, and tried to draw those in my sketchbook as references. I wasn't getting very far. My hedgehog looked kind of weird. I felt that this one looked more like a mouse, maybe with the pointy nose, and it just wasn't working out. So then I looked up some pictures of actual hedgehogs, and that's when I got a better representation and was able to make that into a cartoon image. So I sketched out some different layouts here with the hedgehog. I found a picture where the hedgehog was facing forward straight on, so like a portrait shot. And I picked up some of the characteristics. I did see a drawing, a cartoon drawing, where the mouth was kind of like this with a line around the nose. So it had this curvature here, and I started sketching that, but it's still, like even down here, you can see I did that, but it wasn't working. As I was sketching the actual picture of the hedgehog, I did this little guy up here, and when I was drawing the mouth, I accidentally drew two lines, and I felt it looked like his mouth was open and he was smiling. I thought that worked really well, and so I went with this direction. This is the one that I chose for my favorite, and I found that looking at the real picture of the hedgehog really helped me define the features. So it helped me understand how far apart the eyes should be, how they fall on the face in proximity to the nose, and where the ears are in proximity to the eyes as well. Those little things, when you look at an actual picture of that animal, really help describe that animal in a cartoon setting. Just the placement of those things. So I found that this was much better than what was happening over here. So when I got to this point, I decided to jump over to my iPad. So now I'll show you what I did on my iPad. So here's the finished product. I'm going to show a video of the time lapse of creating this. So I did this in ProCreate, and I've used this program before. It's really nice because it records your steps as you go through. So every brush stroke I take, every pencil mark or erase I make, it captures all of those. It's pretty neat to see. So you can see in the time lapse video here the process that I took. So I start with a pencil and I just sketch out the image. I don't go right into the ink right away because I do want to block out the shapes, recreate what I've drawn in my sketchbook. And once I feel proportions are okay and the balance is pretty good, then I'll come back with an ink pen and just trace those pencil sketches that I have. So as you can see here, I'm doing the outline. Once I have that done, I decided to add a little football helmet just to add a little bit more football references to the hedgehog and make him more part of the scene and less of a separate character. Once I had that established, then I did my pennant and my sentiment. And then I sketched out everything. I have to apologize, I haven't been feeling very well, so my voice is a little bit weak. But keeping in mind, this is all in ProCreate, so even the pencil sketches that you're seeing, those are all digital, and now I'm coming in with the ink pen next. ProCreate comes with all these different brushes that emulate real pens and brushes, so this is really helpful to create that look as if I created this on a paper in analog form, but it's all digital and it's all through this program, which is wonderful. Now when I was done, I ended up with this image, and so I was happy with this. I liked that it had some dimension with the lines from the football field, and I liked that my little hedgehog was front and center. I thought it would be fun to do a pennant as the banner to hold the sentiment. Now, I did mention that I wanted this to be Green Bay focused, so I needed to add a little bit of Green Bay in here. So I decided to go back in and draw a logo on the chest of the hedgehog, or on his belly. So I'll show you drawing that as well. I did a sketch out first of it, And then I came in after the same process and inked it. So then I had this little Green Bay logo on his chest and on his belly, and I thought that was perfect. So I decided to print this out. This is the one I'm going to go with. I'm also going to add this as a digital download in my Etsy shop. So if you do want to download this, I will put the regular version without the logo on his belly. And I'll include this version with the Green Bay logo as a bonus version in the PDF. So I won't write that on my Etsy shop, but if you are watching this video and you do want to have a copy of that version, then it'll be included in the download, just as a secret page in the PDF. So now I'm ready to color this. I'm going to print this on my printer to get started. When I do set up my art in ProCreate, I do it on the regular size page that I need for the card. So in this case, I'm doing 5.5 by 4.25, and I set up my artboard to that size so that it exports at the exact size I need. I put this into Illustrator. You could also drop it into Word. When you print, you just want to make sure that it doesn't scale. You want to keep your proportions, if your proportions are correct. And so I did drop this into Illustrator, and I want to do a background. So like other cards that I make where I have an edge and I bring the artwork down about 1/4 inch on each side, I wanted to do that with this as well. So I brought it into Illustrator and just shrunk it down a little bit, 1/4 inch on each side, and printed out that version. So this is what I have here. This is printed on Neenah Solar White cardstock through my Epson printer. So the ink will be Copic friendly. So now I'm going to trim this out so I can color it. I also have some very faint lines on the paper. It's super hard to see them. Now don't think the camera's going to pick them up just because the paper's so white. You can kind of see them there on this edge here and around the corner. It might be sort of hard to see, but they are there, and that's going to be my guide. I just made those in Illustrator in about a 10% black. So that I can have a guide for cutting. But again, there are these edges where they cut off the edge of the artwork. And so if you did want to line up according to those, you could do the same thing and you would get an even edge as well. So when I laid this out in Illustrator, or if you're using Word or a different print program, I made sure to keep the art to the top of the page so that I had all this extra paper that I could save for stamping later, because it is good paper, and so this gives me a larger piece to save instead of cutting out of the middle of the paper. I'm also going to trim this piece down so that I can do a folded card base using this blue. So I'm going to do this ×2 and then I'll fold it. I've measured out my paper and cut it to the size I need, which is double of a card, A2 size card. So this is 8.5 wide instead of 4.25. I'm going to use my Martha Stewart paper folder, bone folder, envelope maker thing. This tool is really great, but I'm going to use this to create the fold at the 4.5 or 4.25 mark. And this will give me the base for my card. I'm going to begin coloring and doing everything in Copic markers for this card. I'm going to start with the background, the sky area. I put down a piece of spare cardstock around or behind my artwork just because I wanted to color right to the extreme edge and I didn't want to draw on my desk. I had a little bit of a tough time blending the sky. I think that my colors were just too much separated from each other, so my powdery blue was just a little bit too dark with the purpley blue that was a little bit too light. And I find that whenever I'm using Copics, it's always a little bit more challenging to cover a larger area. And I don't know if that's just a case that the ink doesn't come out fast enough out of the brushes. It just doesn't seem like I even have enough flow for covering the larger areas. So I did have to go back and forth on this quite a few times, doing quite a few layers. I'm bringing in this mid-tone blue, or this sort of lighter mid-tone blue, to help buffer down some of that upper darker blue color. But you can still see the strokes. I wasn't terribly happy with how that was coming out, so as you can see, I went over this quite a few times and used a few different shades of blue. I think if I had have chosen colors a little bit closer to each other in range, so not so light, not so dark, it might have been a little bit easier. But I guess I always love a challenge. So in the end, I did get this looking okay, that I was happy with it. But it did take a little bit of work to get to that finish line on this sky color. a few different colors of inks were involved and a lot of layers, but in the end I was happy with what I ended up with, and I was happy that the blue matched the complementing cardstock in the background but wasn't exactly the same color, so it did have its own kind of life to it. Now, because this is a Green Bay themed card and my brother-in-law is a big Green Bay Packers fan, I wanted to use a lot of green and gold, which is their official colors. So I'm doing some of that green in the pennant, and I'm going to use this and carry it throughout the card as well. So I do want to have a good balance of both. When I was in ProCreate, I actually did a color sample, I guess. So when I had my line art done, I made an extra layer underneath my line art in ProCreate and just blocked out some quick colors just to do a visual study and decide if or where I wanted to put the different colors, where I want to put the greens, the yellows, what colors I wanted my hedgehog to be, what kind of tones. And so I did have a point of reference for that. And going in, it made it a lot easier to just go ahead and color those elements. So I'm going to go and do all my green elements first. I'm doing the little belly symbol now, the little logo, and I do have that green in the main lettering and on the helmet as well, because that is also going to help represent those colors of his favorite team. And just doing those touches. I'm doing a very simple basic coloring too, so it's just a medium or a light green and then a darker green in the shadows coming up from the bottom in all the areas. So now I'm doing the yellow. Yellow is my favorite color, so I'm a little bit indulgent on this, and I do like adding a lot of yellow to a scene, and it's a nice bright light color too, so it adds a lot of cheer to a card, I think, in general. With this one, I wanted to do some folds in the pennant. So when I'm doing this darker yellow, you can see it just coming in. It's not quite that dark, it's more of a medium, but I'm just blocking out those folds just to give it a little bit more life and feel a little bit more three-dimensional. So imagining where it would be darker, where it might be folding inward away from the scene. And then I'm going to come in with more of a gold color opposed to a yellow, just to help deepen those shadows on that pennant as well. So I don't want to do anything too dark because I do have my sentiment there, and I want that to be the focal point for this area. I don't want to make the pennant too dark where you can't read the sentiment, especially because the upper part of my sentiment is just script. There's no letters to color in, so it's just going to be black. I don't want to lose that with too much dark colors behind it. So the yellow again was a good choice for this area. For the side of the pennant, I'm going to do it a little bit darker just to help offset it a little bit and give a little bit of visual dimension there. Bringing in the yellows and the golds on the helmet because they are the Green Bay colors. And again, just simple coloring with this, shadows up from the bottom and just following the curvature of the helmet to help give that rounded look, that 3D look. And not using any colors that are too dark, trying to keep everything bright yellow. I'm going to do a little pass on the hedgehog's face. I do want to do some shadows on him too to help give him a little bit of pop in 3D. With his face, I don't want to color it too dark because those features, his eyes and nose and mouth are in black. I don't want to have too many dark colors around his face where it's harder to see his features. So I'm just going to do the lightest pass first, blocking out the shadows, and then I'll come in and build up those darker colors and the shadows, but I'll start with my lightest color first. So I'm doing a wash or a pass, and with the hedgehog's fur or the texture of the fur, I really want to give it kind of more of that texture, like that spiky texture that his fur might have. And so I'm not just doing a solid color wash of this, I'm just kind of flicking the brush and doing little brush strokes. For the most part, it does have a full base color laid down, but it's not going to be perfect. And so you might see a little bit of white here and there peeking through, which is great because I do want it to look like he's kind of furry and fluffy and that it's not just a dense solid color where his fur is. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. So now I'm going to start building up those colors and working inward from the outside edge. And again, just a very simple shading, not anything too complex, just doing the darkest parts around the outer edge of the hedgehog and keeping the lightest parts towards the center. This is probably the easiest way to do a shadow and light base for critter coloring. If you're not too sure where your sum point is, especially, not that I wasn't, but it is just nice to do it this way too. So using the sun point is just a center sun point, then everything around the edges is going to be dark and work towards the light in the middle. So it keeps it easy for that. And just because this is a very central driven card visually, everything just leads to that center. Put your eye, everything just pulls towards the center. It's easy to keep that sun point in the center as well. Just work the shadows to the outside edges. So as I keep coming in with a little bit of a darker layer each time, it starts to build up his dimension, and it really helps his fur and his fluff to feel really round and fluffy, which is exactly what I'm looking for. And again, I'm just doing quick little flicks and dabs with the marker, not doing anything very calculated here, just to keep it looking loose and rustic and very organic, I guess, not too solid or anything. When I got to his belly, I found that his belly was starting to blend in with the fur area. I kind of wanted to keep that separate, so I just went around the outside of the belly with a little bit of a darker tone, and that really helped his belly to pop away visually from the rest of his fur and stand out a little bit more, which also helped the logo stand out. Now I'm going to color the background just using a green that complements the green bay green. So the green bay green is kind of more on the blue side, but has a touch of that yellow. And so by using this sort of more yellowy green, it's going to help pull in the golds from the Green Bay logo as well. It's just kind of tying the two colors together even more without standing out too much. And the football field is green, so of course we're going to use a green in this area. I use the chisel end of the marker to cover this large area. As I mentioned earlier, I do find it challenging to cover bigger areas with Copic markers, and especially getting a nice clean wash of color where it doesn't look streaky. I do find that quite challenging, so I found that using the chisel end just helped block that color in quicker. And as long as the paper's still wet with the marker ink, I find that it blends a little bit easier and loses some of that streakiness that you would normally see if you try to do it all with the brush side of the pen or the marker. I did some very light shadowing on this grass. I did some at the top part, as you see. And then I wanted to put a little shadow underneath him because he's jumping up almost like a little hedgehog cheerleader. So I wanted him to look like he was elevated off the ground, and I just put a shadow below him to do that. I'm going to do an extra little block of color. I'm thinking that this might be like the rail or the foot rail of around the perimeter of the bowl. Just something to give a little bit more interest and dimension in that area, but nothing that stands out too much. So I'm about done the coloring, just doing some final tweaks and darkening up some areas here and there as I see when I'm done. Now I have the folded card. I'm ready to put this together. I had a lot of fun coloring this, and my brother-in-law was so excited because he knows that I put time and effort into making cards, and he was excited that it was his team. In fact, I went to his house a few days after his birthday, and they still had, my sister and him still had the card out on display. It was the only birthday card left out, and I thought that was really kind of them, and they pointed that out to me. So I put some foam tape on the card and just centered it on that folded card, which works well. And this card is ready to go. I had so much fun. So again, if you want the line art for this card, I'm going to have it available in my Etsy shop for download, and it'll come as a PDF file that you can print out and color as you want. You could do markers or pencil crayons, colored pencils, whatever you want to use. Here's a final look at that card. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. It's a little bit of a different card. I love doing the digital stuff too, though. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified the next time I post a video. Thank you so much for watching.